Rose was born in the buzzing and bustling city of Lagos, where life was a constant struggle for those who do not have money. Her parents, Ruth and Louise, were hardworking but poor. Ruth sold fruit in the local market, waking up before dawn to secure the best spots to sell her fruit, while Louise worked as a security guard in a small office building. They could barely make ends meet with their combined efforts, and they lived with their 3 children in a very small one-room apartment in a crowded neighborhood. Rose was the youngest and brightest of the 3 children. Ruth and Louise had high hopes for her, believing she could achieve what they never could, a better life free from poverty. But with their limited income, they could only send her to a poorly funded public school. The classrooms were overcrowded and the teachers were overworked. Despite these challenges, Rose was determined to make the most of her education, holding on to the dream of escaping the life of hardship that surrounded her and her family. As Rose grew older, those dreams began to fade. It seems not achievable. Without money, the path to a better life seemed blocked at every point. After finishing school, the possibility of attending university was an unachievable dream. Her older siblings were already working to help support the family, and now it was Rose's turn. With few options available, she took a job as a cleaner in a grand mansion of a billionaire named David. David was one of the richest men in Lagos, known for his vast business empire and extravagant lifestyle. He was married to Mary, a beautiful and sophisticated woman who was admired by many for her grace and style. Their life was one of luxury, far distant from the struggles of people like Rose and her family. The mansion where Rose worked was a symbol of David's massive wealth. Marble floors, golden chandeliers, and walls adorned with expensive work of art. Each day, as Rose cleaned the mansion, she couldn't help but feel a growing sense of envy. The contrast between David and Mary's life and her own was stark. While her parents struggled to put food on the table, David and Mary lived in surplus, their every need catered to by an army of servants. Rose's resentment grew as she continued to work in the grand mansion. She watched as Mary attended glamorous events and charity galas, dressed in designer clothes, with a life that seemed perfect from the outside. David, on the other hand, was rarely home, often traveling for businesses or entertaining guests. Despite his marriage to Mary, he was known for his reckless behavior, especially when it came to women. His affairs were an open secret, and he never bothered to hide his affairs. As Rose scrubbed the floors and dusted the furniture, she began to imagine what it would be like to have David's wealth. She pictured herself to be in Mary's shoes, living a life of luxury and comfort, far away from the poverty and hardship that defined her existence. The more she thought about it, the more she wanted that life. Her desire for wealth and a better life for her family grew stronger day by day. She really wanted their lives. Rose's feeling of resentment deepened as she watched David's careless behavior. He would come home with different women, acting as if he had no wife at all. Mary, who often traveled for charity work or social events, seemed unaware or simply indifferent to his actions. The obvious contrast between David's life and Rose's situation was stark. She dreamed of escaping her own hardships and providing a better life for her family. As the days passed, her envy turned into a dangerous obsession. She began to plot how she could use David's reckless behavior to her advantage. One evening, while cleaning David's bedroom, Rose stumbled upon something that sparked an idea in her mind: a used condom, carelessly discarded after one of David's many affairs. She realized that if she could somehow get pregnant with David's child, she could demand financial support from him. The thought was both terrifying and thrilling. It was risky, but the potential reward was too great to ignore. Rose knew she needed help to make her plan work, so she went to a doctor who could assist her. But the doctor told her that it wouldn't help unless she agreed to sleep with him. Rose was shocked but felt desperate. She agreed David. She slept with the doctor and the procedure was done. Weeks after the procedure, Rose found out she was pregnant. She felt a mix of fear and excitement. This was her chance to change her life. Rose told her parents, Ruth and Louise, they were angry at first. James, especially, was angry and disappointed. But when Rose explained her plan to get financial support from David so they can live in luxury and forget their lives of hardship, Louise's anger turned to hope. Ruth was worried but saw the potential for a better life. They began to focus on the possibilities of using the money to improve their situation. After Rose told her parents about the pregnancy, she suddenly stopped going to work. David noticed her absence and tried calling her, but her phone was switched off. He was worried and confused, but didn't know where Rose lived. Since he couldn't find her, David hired a new cleaner to replace her. As time went on, David started to forget about Rose. He became absorbed in his work and personal life, but he still had an underlying feeling of worry. His marriage to Mary was becoming increasingly troubling. They had been married for years, and despite his hopes, they still had no children. Mary seemed uninterested in starting a family and was often away on her charity trips. Mary's constant traveling made David feel even more isolated and their relationship distant. When Mary was home, she was often distracted and not even engaged with him. Their conversations were short and lacked warmth. David felt that their relationship was growing colder and more distant. He tried to talk to Mary about having a child, but she always responded with vague promises and excuses. Her frequent absences and lack of interest in their family life only deepened David's frustration. He felt increasingly unhappy and unfulfilled despite his wealth and success. David began to think more about his personal life and his marriage. The absence of a child and Mary's absence left him feeling unfulfilled. He was haunted by the emptiness in his life and the growing rift between him and his wife. 9 months later, Rose gave birth to twins boys. She felt a deep sense of triumph. Yes, I've succeeded. Welcome to luxury, she thought. These boys are David's children and they will inherit his wealth. One afternoon, David was relaxing at home when the doorbell rang. He answered it to find a woman introducing herself as Ruth, Rose's mother. Ruth looked nervous but was determined to speak with him. Ruth informed David that Rose has given birth to his children, 2 boys. David at first found the news hard to believe and laughed it off. What are you saying, madam? Who is your daughter? Is your daughter some kind of magician or miracle worker? I never even had intercourse with her. How can I be responsible for children I didn't father? How possible is that? Is it that you entered the wrong house? If you have nothing useful to say, please leave my house. Ruth was stunned and struggled to find the right words to say. She knew the real story, that Rose had used a condom David had left behind to get pregnant. Ruth was afraid to tell him this, worried that David might react angrily or even have her arrested for Rose's deception. Feeling trapped and unsure of what to do next, Ruth left David's house quickly. Back at home, Ruth told Rose about the conversation with David. Rose listened carefully, her thoughts raising. After hearing the details, Rose decided she would confront David herself. She realized that explaining everything directly to David might be the best way to resolve the situation and secure the support she needed. Rose, feeling both determined and anxious, decided it was time to face David. She knew this meeting could change everything. With her heart racing, she went to David's mansion and asked to speak with him in private. David, curious about what Rose had to say, agreed to see her. He led her to a quiet room and waited for her to explain herself. Rose, trying to keep her nerves in check, began to reveal the truth. She confessed that she had taken one of his his used condoms and used it to get herself pregnant. She explained that she was desperate and saw this as her only chance to secure a better future for herself and her children. Rose admitted it wasn't right, but she felt she had no other choice. As David listened, his expression turned from shock to anger. He couldn't believe what she had done and was furious that she had manipulated the situation to trap him. His emotions were a mix of betrayal and rage. David made it clear he would never accept the children as his. He told Rose that he would soon hear from his lawyers and warned her that she could end up in jail for what she had done. He refused to take responsibility for the children and saw her actions as a manipulative scheme. The conversation ended with tension in the air, leaving the future uncertain for Rose as she walked away. When David's wife Mary returned home from one of her frequent trips, she immediately sensed that something was off. David was more distant than usual, and she noticed a tension in the air that she couldn't quite place. Mary, always sharp and curious, decided to dig around a bit. It didn't take long before she overheard rumors swirling around town. Rumors that her husband had gotten their former cleaner, Rose, pregnant. The news hit Mary like a stone. How could David do such a thing? It's not possible. Her anger boiled over the moment. Stepped into their home that evening. Mary confronted David. Is it true? She demanded, her voice trembling with a mix of rage and hurt. Okay, what have you been hiding? You got her pregnant? Did you really get Rose pregnant? David stood there speechless, not knowing what to say or do. After some minutes of dumbness, he told her what Rose had explained to him earlier. Mary became so furious and was determined to protect her marriage and decided to confront Rose directly. She didn't know where Rose lived, so she asked the security man who had worked at their mansion for years. After some hesitation, he gave Mary Rose's address. Mary went to a small rundown apartment building where Rose lived. The neighborhood was ghetto, poor and nothing like the luxurious life Mary was used to, but that only made her more determined to put an end to the situation. When Rose opened the door, she was surprised to see Mary standing there. Mary didn't waste any time and walked straight into the apartment. Her voice was cold as she spoke, telling Rose she knew about her plan to trap David and break up her family. Rose tried to stay calm and said, "All I wanted was for him to take responsibility for our children. I'm not dragging him with you." But Mary was furious. "Listen to me, dirty sluts. David would never be with you, and that your children would never be part of our family." Mary warned Rose to stay away from her husband and family, or she would make her regret it. With that, Mary left, leaving Rose standing in her apartment, shaking but still determined to fight for her children's future. The confrontation made it clear that the battle over David and the children was far from over. Mary returned home after confronting Rose, her emotions still running high as she walked into the living room. David looked up from his chair and asked where she had been. Mary hesitated for a moment, then told him she had gone to see Rose. David's face darkened with anger. "You went to see her? Why would you do that?" he demanded, his voice rising. "This whole mess is because of you. If you had been serious about getting pregnant, taking care of things at home, and not being distant from me, I wouldn't have had to look elsewhere. You are the reason I ended up bringing other women here in the first place." Mary's eyes flashed with anger at his words. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Are you seriously blaming me for this?" She shot back. "You are the one who can't keep your pants zipped. Don't you dare try to make this my fault, you roaming prick." The room was filled with tension as the two of them stood there, glaring at each other. David was furious, but deep down, he knew that what Mary said wasn't entirely wrong. He had let his own desires and carelessness create this situation, but he couldn't bring himself to admit it. "You don't understand, Mary," David said, said, trying to regain control of the conversation. If you were more present in our home, more involved, maybe things would have been different. But you are always traveling, always focused on something else. I'm your husband, but it feels like I'm just a stranger in my own home. You are very distant from me. Mary wasn't having any of it. Don't try to turn this on me, David. You are a grown man, responsible for your own actions. If you couldn't handle our situation, you should have talked to me instead of having affairs with other women. You are the one who is being foolish, not me. The argument escalated, with both of them saying things they had been holding back for years. The tension between them had been building for so long, and now it was all coming out. They both felt betrayed and hurt, but none of them was willing to back down. Finally, after what felt like hours of arguing, they both fell silent. Exhausted from the fight, the room was quiet, but the anger and frustration lingered in the air. David knew he had made mistakes, but he wasn't ready to admit them yet. Mary, on the other hand, not to let him off the hook easily. One day, Rose was in a small cluttered apartment when she heard an unexpected knock on the door. Opening it, she found the doctor standing there, a worried look on his face. Rose was surprised and asked him how he had managed to find her. The doctor entered the apartment and explained that he heard the information about David taking the case to court. Then he revealed something startling. He said, "I believe that the twins might actually be my children because I had been with you before David's procedure, which meant I might be their biological father." Rose felt a wave of fear and panic. She had kept this secret from everyone, including her parents, and now the doctor knew the truth. Rose quickly asked the doctor to speak quietly, afraid her parents might overhear. The doctor, seeing her anxiety, made an offer. He said he could help her manipulate the DNA test results and even bribe the judge to ensure she won the case. But there was a condition. He demanded that Rose give him a percentage of whatever financial support she received and continued having a relationship with him whenever he wanted. Rose was shocked and disgusted by the doctor's demand. He didn't want to agree to such terms. The idea of being forced to keep seeing him and giving away half of what she might get was upsetting, but she knew she had very few options. If she lost the case, her children's future would be at risk and all her efforts would be for nothing. After a tense silence, Rose reluctantly agreed to the doctor's terms. She made him promise that everything would remain a secret, especially from David and his wife. The doctor, satisfied with the arrangements, left the apartment with a smug look. Rose was left alone, feeling trapped and conflicted as Rose sat in a dimly lit apartment. After the doctor left, she struggled with the reality of her situation. She was deeply worried about the choices she had to make, but she was also determined to secure a better future for her children. The day of the court hearing arrived, and the courtroom was filled with tension. David sat at one end, looking anxious. Rose was there too, clutching her papers, her heart pounding. The judge had been reviewing the evidence, including the manipulated DNA results and the bribes arranged by the doctor. After what felt like an eternity, the judge entered the courtroom and took his seat. The room fell silent as he prepared to announce his decision. David, already worried about the outcome, tried to remain calm. The judge began speaking, his voice steady and authoritative. He announced that the DNA test results, which had been carefully altered, showed that the twins were indeed David's children. Despite the deceitful way Rose had obtained the results, the judge had no choice but to accept them as valid evidence. The judge then delivered the verdict. David, you are ordered to pay Rose 10 million naira in child support every month. This amount is meant to cover the needs of the children and also help to secure their future. David was stunned. His eyes widened in disbelief and he sat there frozen. He had not expected such a high amount. The sum was enormous, and the reality of the situation hit him hard. The judge's decision was final, and David had no choice but to comply. The DNA results left no room for doubt or appeal. Rose, on the other hand, felt a mix of relief and triumph. The court's decision meant she would finally receive the financial support she needed for her children. She knew the journey had been difficult and full of moral compromises, but the outcome gave her hope for a better future. As David left the courtroom, he was obviously upset. He had to face the consequences of the actions he had made and the manipulation that had been part of the case. Rose watched him go, feeling a complex mix of satisfaction and triumph about what the future would hold for her and her twins. A week after David paid Rose the first 10 million naira, her life had changed drastically. She had moved into a much bigger and better house, showing her newfound wealth. The cramped apartment she once lived in felt like a distant memory now, but things were not entirely smooth. Doctor had been trying to reach Rose to no avail. He finally decided to visit her in person. He showed up at her new elegant home, looking frustrated and impatient. Rose had been avoiding his calls, knowing he might come with demands. When Rose opened the door, she was surprised to see the doctor. She let him in, but kept her demeanor cold. The doctor didn't waste time. Rose, I've been trying to reach you since then. I can see you are now a big madam. You haven't kept your promise. I'm still waiting for my percentage and for you to continue seeing me as we agreed. Rose stood her ground and said, I'm not giving you anything. You made a deal based on lies and I've already paid the price. Now you are just trying to blackmail me. The doctor's face turned red with anger. You can't do this. We had an agreement. If you don't follow through, I will expose everything. People will find out about the fake DNA test and the bribes. We will both be in a serious trouble. Rose didn't back down. Go ahead and try. If you make any trouble, I will expose you too. I'll reveal how you manipulated the results and were involved in bribing officials. Your license will be seized and both of us will end up in jail. If that is okay by you, go ahead. I say go ahead. The doctor, realizing he was in a tough spot, tried to negotiate. Okay, let's talk. Maybe we can work something out. But Rose wasn't interested in negotiating. There is nothing to discuss. If you want to stay out of trouble, you will leave me alone and keep quiet. Seeing he had no other choice, the doctor agreed to leave. He walked out of Rose's house, frustrated and defeated. Once gone, Rose closed the door behind him, feeling a sense of relief and fulfillment. She knew she had secured her future and was prepared to defend it against anyone who tried to take it away. As Rose looked around her new spacious home, she felt a mix of satisfaction and caution. She had achieved what she wanted. Back at David's house, Mary was furious. She stormed into the living room where David was sitting, his face still showing signs of the stress from the recent court case. David, I can't believe you just gave Rose that huge sum of money without questioning her. Really? Mary shouted. How could you be so careless and foolish? I thought you were educated and smarter than this. You are acting so senseless. David looked up, trying to remain calm. Mary, please, let me explain. I did not want to cause any more trouble. The court made final decision, and I thought it was best to settle things quickly and move on. Mary became furious. Settle things quickly? You didn't even bother to investigate properly. I'm starting to suspect that you were involved with Rose in some real way. No, make me understand. Why else will you just hand over such a large amount of money without doing your own checks? You believe just like that? You did it? David tried to reason with her. No, Mary, it's not like that. I just wanted to do what was right for the children. They are my responsibility now, and I want to make sure they are taken care of. I didn't want to make things worse by dragging out the situation. Mary's frustration grew. So now they are your kids. Really? You are saying that with no hesitation after giving away so much money? I don't understand how you could be so naive. What if Rose was just playing you the whole time? The whole thing looks suspicious and manipulative. David sighed deeply. I didn't want to make any more conflicts. I wanted to settle it and ensure the children have what they need. I know it wasn't ideal, but I thought it was the best way to handle it, at least for the sake of the children. Mary shook her head, her face red with anger. Well, you've made a mess of things. You should have been more cautious and done your own investigation. Now, we have to deal with the consequences of your decisions. David tried to calm her down. We will figure things out. I understand you are upset, but yelling at me won't help. Let's try to walk through this together. Mary wasn't convinced. I don't know how we are going to fix this now. You've made things difficult for us, and I'm worried about what's next. The situation is far from over. That's a lot of money. As Mary stormed off, David sat in silence, feeling the weight of her words. He knew the situation was complicated, and despite his intentions, things has gotten out of control. The problems between him and Mary were far from resolved, and he could only hope that they would find a way to manage the fallout from his decisions. Meanwhile, the doctor was growing increasingly frustrated. His financial situation was there, with months of unpaid salary, leaving him in a difficult spot. He had once seen Rose as a source of easy money, but now his feelings shifted. He was angry at her and desperate for cash. One afternoon, he decided to confront Rose directly. He went to her new luxurious house, hoping to get at least a portion of the money she owed him. As he rang the doorbell and waited impatiently, he thought about how much he needed the money to support his own family. When Rose opened the door, she was surprised to see him. She knew why he was there and had been dreading this moment. She invited him inside, but her expression was cold and wary. "What do you want?" Rose asked, trying to sound indifferent. The doctor didn't waste any time. "Rose, I need money, even if it's not the full percentage we agreed on. I need something. I've been waiting for weeks, and I can't keep living like this." Rose shook her head. "I'm not giving you any money. You made your bed with deceit, and now you have to deal with it. If you try to threaten me, I'll make sure everyone knows about your involvement. Do your worst." The doctor's face twisted with anger. "Is that so? Well, if you won't give me any money, then how about this? I want my twins boys back." Rose stared at him, shocked and appalled. "Are you joking? You are too poor to think you can just take my children. You must be out of your mind." The doctor's frustration boiled over. "You think this is a joke? I'm serious. If you won't help me, then I'll make sure you regret it. I'll find a way to get what I want." Rose stood firm, her voice cold. "I suggest you leave now, before things get worse for you. I won't give you anything, and I won't let you take my children. You are only making things worse for yourself." The doctor, seeing that Rose was determined to be wicked, turned on his heel and left the house in anger. As he walked away, he muttered under his breath about how he would deal with Rose. He was determined to find a way to get the money he needed, even if it is meant taking drastic measures. Rose closed the door and leaned against it, feeling a mix of relief and unease. She knew the doctor was dangerous and that his threats were not to be taken lightly, but she also felt a strong resolve to protect her new life and her children at any cost. Growing increasingly worried about the threat from the doctor, Rose decided to take drastic action. She bought a gun and made a plan to lure the doctor into a secluded place under the pretense of meeting him for a secret appointment. One evening, Rose contacted the doctor and told him she wanted to meet him in a quiet, remote location. The doctor, eager for the money he had been promised, agreed without hesitation. When the doctor reached the meeting place, Rose was already waiting. As he approached, Rose pulled out the gun and with no warning, shot him. The doctor fell to the ground, seriously injured. Rose quickly fled the scene, leaving him behind. The doctor, although critically hurt, was rescued by passerby and he managed to survive. Meanwhile, he had opened up to his wife on everything about Rose and the threat she had made to him before going to see Rose at the secret appointment. So when he didn't return home that night, his wife grew worried. She remembered the address her husband had given her in case something went wrong, which was David's house. The next morning, she went to David's mansion. Frantic and anxious, she explained to David what had happened and how Rose had tricked her husband. David was furious. He immediately contacted the police and informed them of the situation. The police quickly launched an investigation. They tracked down Rose and arrested her for the attack. When the doctor recovered, he too was arrested for his involvement in the bribery and deceit. The judge who had accepted the bribe was also caught, sacked from his position and arrested. 2 months later, life began to settle down for everyone. Mary, who had been deeply affected by the chaos, found out she was pregnant. She and David were overjoyed with the news. The couple focused on rebuilding their lives and their relationship. David had learned a hard lesson and was now fully committed to his wife. They worked on mending their marriage and planning for their future together. David and Mary's life slowly returned to normal, with the challenges they had faced serving as a stark reminder of the importance of trust and loyalty. Hi, beautiful viewers. What moral lessons did you learn from this dramatic tale? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, give it a thumbs up, share it with friends, and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss out on any of our latest updates. Thank you so much, guys, for watching. Stay blessed. I love you all. Bye for now.